I thought this guy had a very interesting life story. He had found and dug out a mammoth when he was an adolescent. Then he became an expert on expensive violins.
The auction house is accepting bids for the instrument and expects to sell it for more than $45 million.
For collectors, I mean, this is kind of the holy grail of instruments in terms of what you can purchase in your lifetime.
He had money. He had valuable instruments.
But he also had this trail of financial instability and was clearly susceptible to some pretty out there conspiracy theories.
It's hard to make up a coherent image of Bernhard, but as many interesting characters, also a difficult character to deal with.
Tanto el alemán como su hija fueron asesinados el 22 de octubre pasado en la zona de Patiño, Itagüá, en su vivienda.
The place was so remote, nobody would have heard them scream.
The nature of the killings, the execution, seemed to involve veteran killers.
Dos disparos de arma de fuego. Uno recibió un disparo en la nuca, el ciudadano alemán, y su hija menor de 15 años un disparo en el vientre.
Police said that 4 of the world's most expensive musical instruments went missing. Then a lot of stories began to unravel.
Sería, esto por supuesto es la hipótesis del Ministerio Público, poder vender en el mercado negro.
In death, Bernhard left a string of murder suspects, but very few answers.
In the morning hours of this day, I called him. I don't remember the exact hour. I think it was 8 or 9 in the morning, and his cell phone was directing me directly to his voice box. And I knew him in the morning hours. He preferred not to be disturbed, so I didn't care any normal day. But I think at midday, was there calling him, no response. This was rare. There was a moment where I just entered in the property, and when I was walking upstairs here, I saw that the door was open, and I saw that there was a mount of glass outside the door in this part of the stairs. Then I entered here. I saw this chaotic scene, and my eyes turned right to the bathroom, and I saw Lorena in this bloodbath, naked, dead.
Stefan called me. He was completely devastated on the phone, and he told me that they were murdered. I couldn't believe it. And Lorena. I try not to think too deeply about that because otherwise I will be crazy.
Promised I show you how to make sauerkraut the German way. We have a little guy here. The slimy little fella. If you turn around against the light, you can look right through. He's got a special name of it. I always forget what his name is.
Albert.
Albert, yeah. Albert is our fermenter. Hi, Albert. Bye-bye.
He was a outstanding character, a good man, and he was an excellent father. An excellent father. I saw this with Lorena.
Grinding this into pieces. So now we're going to start with the hard work, okay?
She was funny, she was open-minded, she was always laughing. Difficult to remember because it hurts a little bit.
Bernhard hat Lorena abgöttisch geliebt und umgekehrt auch. Beide haben viel voneinander gelernt.
Wenn, dann und warten, bis das Mammut kommt. Dann wartest du hinter diesem Felsen, bis es an dir vorbeigezogen ist und nimmst deinen Speer und spickst den Mammut in die Kniekehle und piek, boing.
Sie war mit dem Abitur schon fast fertig im Alter von 14 Jahren. Also intelligent, lustig und ja, liebenswert. Lorena war unser aller Engel.
In 2017, Bernhard and his daughter moved to Paraguay. He was very much a doting father. He called her Lolo. They built this very sort of idyllic life of outdoor activities. They would post videos on YouTube of them building things. They really loved to cook together, and they were in this small community, Aregua, and by all accounts, it was a great life that they had built for themselves.
Blut auf dem Boden, aufgerissene Schränke, eine durchwühlte Wohnung. Das ist der Ort, an dem Bernhard von Bredow und seine 14 Jahre alte Tochter Lorena nicht nur umgebracht, sondern tatsächlich bestialisch gefoltert wurden.
You know, as a reporter, you're just trying to wrap your head around it and say, okay, what can I say with any confidence here actually happened? And with this particular case, very little.
Volker, he arranged the funeral about 3-4 days after it happened. He sent me a photo of when he was in the coffin, because it's so unreal. This is something that happens in a movie or somewhere, but not to you. It's impossible. We did everything together, everything. We built these huts in the woods, and it was really soulmates. I remember we were sitting at the table at home and my brother came in and he said, "I found a mammoth." And at firstly we laughed. And then he showed us a rib bone. Then we knew that it's a mammoth.
40.000 Jahre lang spülte der Bach Lehm über die Gebeine, bis das Mammut von Bernhard gefunden wurde.
In 1975, at the age of 16, Bernard discovered Oscar the mammoth.
Dann ist man also vor allen Dingen als 16-Jähriger sowieso vollkommen unglaubwürdig. Und das muss man halt im Laufe des Alters wettmachen.
It was really sort of the defining moment of his adolescence in a lot of ways, and really sort of set the tone for his life. In the 90s, he opened this museum in Siegsdorf called the Mammotheum. It really spoke to Bernard's character and his ingenuity, the way that he handled the discovery of this mammoth.
Dass das Mammotheum jetzt die Aufgabe hat, von diesen eine große Ausstellung für Europa.
People were intrigued by his knowledge. And it's all a self-study.
He was able to really build this platform for himself and do it pretty much all on his own.
Ich hätte mir natürlich nie träumen lassen seinerzeit, dass ich 25.000 Arbeitsstunden darin investieren muss, um Mammuten wieder auf die Beine zu helfen. Das Mammutheum und wird wohl eines Tages mal ohne mich auskommen.
Yeah, he traveled a lot all over the world. Quite exciting, actually. Yeah, he lived the life of several people. That's a nice one. But it's not all gone.
Resulta que continúa la investigación sobre el crimen del alemán, en este caso Bernard Raimund von Bredow y su hija que se había ellos.
When I called the police, I was obviously hopeful that all will be handled in the manner. I'm not a policeman, but that someone expects. But this illusion was destroyed very fast because the first policemen that arrived here were walking all around, touching things, looking at things. Everybody entered here. But there was no evidence process before this. Crime scene was contaminated completely.
Wir wussten damals, weil wir den leitenden Kommissar gefragt haben, besteht eine Möglichkeit, aufgrund des derzeitigen Stands der Ermittlungen die Täter zu fassen. Da hat er gesagt, keine Chance. Das war natürlich nicht, was wir wollten. Und ich nehme Kontakt mit der Bild-Zeitung auf, um den internationalen Druck zu erhöhen. Und so vielleicht doch irgendwelche Ermittlungen anzuleiern, dazu führen könnten, dass die Verbrecher ermittelt werden. Dann haben die Bild-Zeitung angefangen zu berichten und haben einen Reporter aus Brasilien hierher geschickt.
I only knew that Bernhard von Bredow was a well-known, they called him like mammoth scientist, an interesting person. first idea of what this whole thing was about was when I met Volker Granas. Our first stop was at the graveyard. What struck me is that they buried the bodies, but they hadn't done a proper forensic investigation. They buried the bodies, they closed the murder site, and they stopped investigating. Afterwards, we went to Bernhard's house where the murders had happened, and that's when I saw the crime scene. This is the footage that I took when we went in. It's the crime scene. You can see the blood on the floor, the mess it is. You see an old cello here. Lots of artwork on the walls, paintings. Right from the beginning, looked to me, with my experience in Latin America, like an organized crime because of the nature of what they had done to Bernhard. He was found naked, tortured. They had burned his testicles, and he was killed with a shot in the back of the neck. They killed his daughter. She was a teenager. They shot her in the stomach. She ended up in the bathtub. And I was asking myself, who did this?
Der 62-Jährige soll wertvolle Stradivari-Violinen restauriert und bei sich aufbewahrt haben.
The Paraguayan media really made a big deal of these Stradivarius violins that were supposedly found in Bernhard's house.
Según la hipótesis de la fiscalía, el móvil del crimen fue un intento por conseguir los certificados de autenticidad de 4 violines que pertenecían a Bernhard.
The Paraguayan investigators quickly announced that this was the motive for this horrific killing. And that's really what caught my eye as a reporter in California. How does a Stradivarius violin end up in Paraguay, and why is someone going to be murdered over it?
He bought old instruments and he dismantled them and things like that. And first I thought he's crazy. I really thought, what is he doing now? And the next time I came, he had built violins. He took me to the Berliner Philharmoniker. They played on one of his violins, and I thought, wow, yeah.
His main income was with violins, buying, selling violins. He told me, I'm not sure if this is the truth or not, but repairing violins for someone like Vladimir Putin or Abramovich. He had good contacts to China, selling instruments. I don't want to judge him, but I think he was not the best guy managing money, but wealthy, yes.
Man sieht ja auch immer horrende Preise für Stradivarius und Guarneri, glaube ich, heißen die. Das sind alles Instrumente, die für 15 und Millionen und mehr über den Tresen gehen. Und Bernhard hat eine...
A lot of these instruments come with centuries of lore attached to them. There's only a finite amount of these super rare instruments.
Lot 21.
And that sent the prices soaring.
82,000, 84,000.
People were willing to go to great lengths to get a hold of these rare instruments.
All done. Hills.
For violins, there is no black market. You cannot sell a violin of high value simply like that. But if you have the documentation, the history of the violin complete, this, yes, has a value. And there the theory of the violins was born.
Okay, we're good to start.
Er konnte mit seinen hässlichen Fingern unheimlich schöne Sachen machen, ja. Er konnte eigentlich alles reparieren irgendwie. Er hatte irgendwie begabte Hände, ja, fürs Handwerk. Und er konnte sich brillant, toll darstellen und sich gut verkaufen und alle Leute haben ihn bewundert. Das konnte er unheimlich gut und er konnte unheimlich gut Eindruck machen, wenn er das wollte. Er war ein interessanter Mensch. Einerseits war er ein Genie, andererseits hatte er Defizite.
Once you start looking into the background, a lot of these people who moved to Paraguay, involved in this story at least, you start to see some unsavory elements.
Bernhard moved to Paraguay because he was not satisfied at all with the direction that Germany was heading. Germany wasn't being Germany anymore. There is a history of German immigration in Paraguay. For example, the Mennonites, a religious minority. Then after the Second World War, a couple of Nazis moved there. And recently, Paraguay saw an influx of Germans who were not satisfied with the way that Germany was developing in terms of, let's say, immigration, in terms of liberal social issues, then recently in terms of the whole corona and vaccine issue.
He sort of fell into these conspiracies around George Soros and Bill Gates, and he started to view Paraguay as a place to escape. He really started evangelizing for Paraguay to his friends back home.
Ich wollte auswandern und er auch und wir haben natürlich drüber gesprochen, weil ich war oft bei ihm zu Besuch und da hat mir über alles Mögliche gesprochen. Ne, und er war ja mein bester Freund, ja. Dann hatte er die Idee mit Paraguay. Da gedacht, Paraguay wäre doch wohl das ideale Land, ne? Und vor allen Dingen schön korrupt. Da kann man machen, was man will. Ja, da hat man Freiheit. Na, jedenfalls, er hat mich dann vorausgeschickt. Als Vorhut.
There was really a sense of building blocks in this community where one person recommends to the other person to come out, and there was this sense that they were building this paradise for themselves together.
Now my brother said, oh, you should get a green card. He was building a new house with 2 apartments, and he said, one apartment is for me when I come. I said, okay. His lawyer, Jimmy Paez, he said, oh, I can do that for you.
Mi nombre completo es Jimmy Alberto Páez Giret. Al completar mis estudios en Alemania, como el gobierno alemán no me pidió la devolución del dinero, me pidió que yo asesore, aconseje y ayude a los alemanes en el exterior, en particular en mi país, Paraguay. Es una comunidad alemana muy cerrada. Solamente uno puede ingresar a través de otro alemán. A través de la embajada, a través de contactos, se puede llegar a ellos. Porque ellos eligieron Paraguay en razón de que se sienten más libres en Paraguay que en Alemania. Y no entienden la forma como las autoridades en el Paraguay llevan las cosas. Entonces yo actuaba como medio de comprensión de cómo es la vida en el Paraguay. Bernat es una persona, bueno, era una persona muy cerrada. Se le dice una ermitaña. La palabra española es ermitaña. Su mundo era su hija, su vida, sus instrumentos, su entorno, ¿verdad? Y poco amigos, siempre muy encerrado en su mundo, ¿verdad?
¿Cierto que se tiene la colaboración de policía extranjera?
También, sí, asimismo están en comunicación con nosotros y también tuvimos reuniones. Si bien nuestro país es un país soberano, se rige por nuestras leyes, pero no está de más tener alguna información externa.
So when pressure was building up to solve this case, they changed the prosecutor. Sandra Ledesma became the main prosecutor. Right away, she was very proactive. She had the bodies dug out again. They did a forensic investigation. They found a piece of a bullet in one of the bodies.
Se han realizado tomas de muestras de las uñas a fin de poder hacer comparaciones con ADN de cualquier sospechoso en el caso.
And then they did a raid. They searched Volker Granes' house. He didn't cooperate right away. He didn't open one room that he had.
Tenemos incautado una docena de armas, tenemos incautado varios violines y creemos que hasta el momento lo que está cobrando más fuerza es que el móvil del crimen sería el fines de robo.
They found a pretty suspicious site. Volker was in possession of a bunch of Bernard's violins, and Stefan at the same time was caught trying to hide this armory of weapons that Volker had on his property. And what seemed sort of weird was that Volker and Stefan arranged a funeral just a few days after this killing, and that just struck people as a bit odd. Your friends get killed, and instead of waiting for the authorities to do the proper investigative work, you just go right ahead and bury the bodies.
En ese momento el Ministerio Público por estrategia va a utilizar su teoría del caso de quién pudo estar ahí o quién no pudo estar ahí y cuál es la participación de cada uno y el motivo, que es lo más importante, porque para que ocurra este tipo de hechos punibles, este tipo de homicidios, tiene que haber un móvil del crimen.
Jetzt gibt es eine überraschende Entwicklung. 3 Deutsche wurden in Paraguay festgenommen und sitzen in Untersuchungshaft.
The authorities concluded that, one, this couldn't have been a single killer. There had to be at least 2 people to subdue Bernard. Bernard was a big man. They believed that the person that killed Bernard must have been known to Bernard prior to the killing. Otherwise, why would they have killed Lorena as well? The idea is that Lorena could have ID'd the killers. And there was also this strange element of the glass in the front door was apparently broken from the inside of the house, which looked like it was someone trying to make it seem that they had broken into the house. when in fact they might have just been let in.
Nosotros consideramos que el móvil de este hecho era en realidad un robo, que eran personas que conocían que era lo que tenía guardado la víctima, en este caso, en su caja fuerte.
Sandra Ledesma was very convinced of her theory. Her theory was Volker and Stefan and Eve had conspired to murder Bernhard, to take possession of his instruments, to find the documents, and to sell them. Her main argument was that why would Volker not open that room for the police if he had nothing to hide?
Wie kam ich zu Bernhards Geigen? Das ist ganz einfach erklärt. Die Familie hat mich gebeten, nimm alles mit, was du kannst, bewahre es bei dir im Haus sicher auf und rede mit niemandem darüber.
They locked up Stefan and Volker. I was completely shocked. Couldn't understand because they are the last people who would harm my brother. Never ever. Volker helped me and he took the violence on my order, on my request. The police is quite corrupt, so when they take something, you don't know whether you will get it back anymore.
Die Polizei und die Staatsanwaltschaft sahen sich der Problematik gegenübergestellt, dass sie Ergebnisse vorzeigen müssen. Aufgrund einer Beschuldigung, einer haltlosen Beschuldigung, wurden wir verhaftet.
Sandra Ledesma completely dismissed Volker's alibi. He had been to one of his farms. He had passed a toll station, and there must have been footage of him passing the toll station. So I thought she was inverting the roles. She had to prove his guilt.
The police weren't speaking to me. They weren't releasing any of the violins that they had in their possession. You know, they claimed they had Stradivarius violins, but they wouldn't release any evidence that there was any truth to that claim. You hear often that don't trust the police, you know, that they're corrupt. My impression was just of secrecy on the part of the police and also incompetence.
Wir haben natürlich im Gefängnis unheimlich viel Zeit gehabt und haben die ganze Situation immer wieder durchgekaut. Wer könnte es gewesen sein? Wer schuldet Bernhard Geld? Wenn Untersuchungen stattgefunden haben, waren das Untersuchungen, die Steffen und ich aus dem Knast heraus über unsere Anwälte angeleiert haben. Für alles, was untersucht wurde, haben wir bezahlt. Die ballistischen Untersuchungen, die Auswertung der Telefone. Hier muss man für alles bezahlen.
If you ask me how much money I had to pay, I cannot tell you an exact amount, but I can tell you that I lost everything.
Teniendo en cuenta que habían 2 víctimas, no había pistas de los posibles implicados, de que había denuncias entre la víctima con el procesado en este caso.
Er ist zu mir gekommen und hat sich als mein bester Freund dargestellt, gegeben. Und ich war als Kind sehr einsam, ich war isoliert und ich habe mir immer einen Bruder gewünscht. Und als der hat er sich gegeben. Und das war die Falle, in die ich reingetappt bin. Falle? Ja, weil er dann später hat mein Cello unterschlagen.
At one point, Bernard and Eve's relationship really fractures. Eve says that he loaned this cello to Bernard to sell, and Eve claims that Bernard stole it from him. Bernard said that he had given Eve his violins to sell. Then at one point when Bernard is away on business, Eve tells Bernard that his house burns down in Paraguay. And this has all of Bernard's violins in the house, and they were lost in the fire. This starts this legal battle between Bernard and Eve. It really sort of made the two enemies of each other.
Bernard me llama a mí para que yo le demande a Ives, porque le debía dinero, porque no le quería pagar. Entonces le demandamos ante el juzgado de paz de Areguá. Pero ellos siempre estaban en un pleito judicial. Incluso se llegó a embargar ese terreno de Ives por deudas. Desde esa ocasión en adelante ellos tuvieron problemas.
Hat mich behandelt wie den letzten Idioten. Er hat eigentlich Instrumente schon mitgebracht gehabt, die wollte er hier an Orchestermusiker verkaufen. Die Geschäfte hat er alle in meinem Haus abgewickelt und bis ich dann irgendwann gesagt habe, du Mann, mir ist es lästig, ich bin Musiker, ich bin Arzt, ich habe zum Verkaufen kein Talent, ich kann nichts verkaufen. Und lass mich mit deinem Scheiß in Ruhe und ich habe dann versucht, ihn loszuwerden und das hat er gemerkt und dann wurde er immer unangenehmer. Ich hatte aber, seitdem mein Haus gebrannt war, mit ihm überhaupt keinen Kontakt mehr. Auch mit dem Volker Granas nicht, weil ich wusste, okay, der ist mein Feind, will ich nichts mit dem zu tun haben.
Sort of the more you learn in this story, the murkier it gets. And I very much felt that as a reporter. I felt that I never really knew who to trust. There's a lot of conflicting information you're hearing, a lot of different accounts, a lot of accusations. But there was this growing sense that Eve really might have something to do with this murder.
About 2 weeks after it happened, I was in Paraguay. My family, they didn't want me to go. They said it's far too dangerous. Somebody of the family had to go. You can't leave that like that. I contacted Jimmy because that's one of the persons I knew from my visits before. The strange thing was, Jimmy, when I called him, he said no, his family has advised him not to be in contact with me. I found that strange. And then I wrote to him back, told him, okay, but I would like to talk about my brother and what was he doing. Maybe the paperwork will show something, what could be the reason why he was murdered. Finally, he agreed to meet. He showed me the files. I saw some handwritten paper in which it was said that Jimmy would be the inheritor of the property. And I thought, that's strange. The handwriting was quite chaotic, but my first impression was that's written under stress. I knew that Lorena was the one who should inherit everything. That would have explained why Lorena had to die too. I was internally scared, but absolutely no show. Very friendly, as normal as possible. I didn't have a good feeling about this.
My reaction in hearing this from Anita was, wow, this is like the dumbest murderer ever. I thought, well, case closed. There's your killer in Jimmy.
Jetzt nahm die Polizei einen weiteren Mann fest, Jimmy Paez. Der ehemalige Anwalt des Erschossenen von Bredow wird verdächtigt, an den Morden beteiligt gewesen zu sein. Wie die Staatsanwaltschaft mitteilte, wurden bei 2 Razzien in den Häusern des Verdächtigen hohe Euro-Geldbeträge sowie 3 weitere wertvolle Geigen und Papiere gefunden, die offenbar von Bredow gehörten.
The police do a raid on Jimmy's mother's house, and they find a bunch of cash and a bunch of violins. And they find a rental car in Jimmy's possession that had a GPS in it that apparently placed him near Bernard's house at the time of the killings.
En realidad, en el sistema de justicia, bastantes quejas de Jimmy. Justamente él mismo había sido sancionado por la corte porque él mismo ya tenía problemas, ya tanto judicialmente como personalmente, con decirte que tal es el ejemplo que en el momento que hicimos uno de los allanamientos a la casa de Jimmy, todos los vecinos salieron a aplaudir.
Y no tiene miedo de decir la verdad. Tiene todos los documentos en regla. Todos los documentos tienen regla. Y acá está esposado y en el calabozo.
Jimmy was looking for money, I think, every second of his life. He was the lawyer of the devil here in Paraguay. He described himself like this. So I thought he has a need to show himself like a violent and dangerous person. But I didn't believe this. Today, I have to admit that I was wrong.
Sí, el abogado del diablo murió desde el momento que la Corte Suprema de Justicia en el 2019 le casó la matrícula al abogado del diablo. Y luego, por movimientos judiciales, lo involucró en un asesinato en el 2021. Y en el 2021 en adelante, Jimmy Paez está en prisión desde el 17 de noviembre del 2021 y se entregó a Dios y es abogado de la Iglesia Católica, miembro de la Pastoral Social Penitenciaria y se dedica a la educación.
La etapa investigativa ya culminó, una etapa investigativa bastante incidentada en el sentido de que Jimmy nunca quiso designar un abogado defensor y su insistencia en querer defenderse sin que la ley le habilite. El nexo causal más fuerte que tenemos como prueba es justamente un documento incautó del domicilio de la madre de Jimmy, que es el testamento de la víctima. Sin embargo, la pericia caligráfica que se realizó a la escritura de Ips, uno de los procesados, y de Jimmy, otro de los procesados que actualmente se encuentran privados de su libertad, en espera de juicio, sí nos dio los indicios de que ellos fueron los que falsificaron el testamento de la víctima, que justamente es la prueba fundamental que le da fuerza a nuestra teoría del caso.
The police start to wonder if Jimmy and Eve were both in on this together. Eve to get revenge, Jimmy to get a payday. They find increased phone conversations between Jimmy and Eve around the time of the murder. And then they also say that at one point they exchange a blueprint of Bernard's house. This really seems to be quite incriminating details.
El caudal probatorio que tiene la fiscalía es como para sentarlos en el banquillo de acusados, señalarlos y sostener una acusación.
Ahora, pasando 2 años, yo hago un recuento de todo lo que pasó, que a pesar de mi obstáculo físico, llegué muy alto en la vida, soy una persona voluntariosa, me pagué mis propios estudios, aguanté mis propios dolores para salir adelante en la vida. Yo voy a pelear contra el juez corrupto, voy a pelear por mi libertad, que es lo que me corresponde por ley, pero no voy a permitir que ningún juez corrupto me juzgue.
Ich hätte den Mord begangen oder da mitgewirkt oder irgendwie sowas, keine Ahnung. Alles Fantasie von dieser Ledesma. Keine Ahnung, was in deinem Kopf vorgeht. Interessiert mich auch nicht. Ich weiß nur, ich habe damit nichts zu tun, ich war da nicht dabei, keine Ahnung. Aber die Tatsache, dass Unschuldige verfolgt werden, ist für mich da ein Beweis, dass sie die tatsächlichen Verbrecher beschützen.
Ein Mann wie Bernhard, da kann man immer noch sagen, der hat sein Leben gelebt und genossen. Aber so ein junges Ding aus dem Leben gerissen, bevor es die Liebe und andere Dinge, Schöne erlebt hat. Ich war in der letzten Woche noch bei dem am Grab und wenn ich da stehe und an die Zeiten denke, dann habe ich immer noch Ansätze von Tränen in meinen Augen.
How do I hold memory? The little things. Something he told me, something I experienced with Lorena. The lovely small things, yes. Whoever that did, I forgive them. Not for their sake, but for my own sake. It harms me, not them. It happened, and I can't change it. My brother wouldn't be pleased with me if I would sit in a corner crying. He wants me to live.